Welcome to Public Pictures Theater. I'm your host, Jim Lenze, and my co-host is Jake Swoger.
Tonight on Public Pictures Theater, we will be watching a very confusing film titled Angel and the Batman. John Wayne plays Batman, and although he's never actually seen dressed as...
Jake, it's not Angel and the Batman.
It isn't?
It's Angel and the Bad Man. The Bad Man.
Oh.
Yeah.
That makes a lot more sense. Okay, guess the film's better than I originally thought. Okay, so tonight we'll be watching a very understandable film called Angel and the Badman.
This 1947 Western film stars John Wayne as Quirt Evans, a charismatic outlaw on the run from both his enemies and the marshal, as he is forced to seek refuge on a Quaker family farm. Quirt quickly begins to fall for the farmer's daughter, played by Gail Russell, and begins to feel a conflict brewing inside of him.
Which will he choose? His violent and wild life as an outlaw, or the simplicity of the farm and a new love? Thanks to copyright not being renewed in 1975, we can all find out together and nobody has to go to jail. So sit back and relax. It's Angel and the Badman tonight on Public Pictures Theater. Can we watch Batman after this?
No.
Oh.
Welcome back to tonight's discussion panel for Angel and the Badman. I'm Jim Lenze, and I'm joined here tonight by Candace Howell and by Jake Swoger. So let's get started on our discussion of Angel and the Badman. First of all, what did you think of the movie?
It wasn't bad. It was kind of an enjoyable thing.
Kind of enjoyable?
I actually liked it a lot. My dad loves John Wayne, so I've watched John Wayne movies all my life, and this one was kind of refreshing in the sense that it kind of took a little different take on Western films in general and a John Wayne film.
Yeah, this was actually the first John Wayne film I ever saw.
Really?
Yeah, up to this point I had no familiarity with John Wayne. I knew he was a big movie star, obviously.
The Duke.
Yep, but never, this is the first one I ever saw with him in it.
Well, it'll be interesting to find out if you're interested in seeing more John Wayne films. You certainly can find them. They're available in YouTube and all over the web, and of course you can rent them. But let's start at the end. We'll go right to the end of the film, which we just saw, and we'll talk about the decision that he makes at the end. So you have a life of adventure and a life of domestic bliss on the farm. So which do you choose? Candace, did he make the right choice?
I think for the aspects of the film, it was basically about the redeeming qualities of love and how you can turn something negative into something positive. After living, he was living a negative life of crime, basically. He had done some violent things in his life, and just the aspect of caring for somebody else and showing his support for the community really redeemed him in the end. So I think he made the right choice. I liked the end, and it was definitely a refreshing take on Western in general.
Do you think you would have liked the end as well if he had decided to leave her and go off on a life of adventure?
I would have thought he was a jerk.
Jake, what do you think?
Yeah, same thing. I think this is really about, I think it's really about how men can be civilized by a good woman, by how a man, it's about a wild man who wants to settle down, ultimately because he met the right woman. And I think really whenever you look at it like that, it's a love story. The man sacrificed everything that he had, everything that he had worked so hard towards, not worked so hard towards, but everything that he had built up over his career of kind of being this outlaw, this wild man, and he gave it all up to be with somebody he fell in love with who actually ended up rubbing off on him in a good way.
not only her, but also her whole family.
Yeah.
I mean, it really seems to be quite an affection between him and her mother, between him and her father and her younger brother. And as you said, the community seems to embrace him as well. They give him a Bible and they embrace him and say, "You're welcome to be part of our community." So there is this love affair at the center of it, but there's also this larger embracing of a community, because she says she'll go with him.
Yeah.
She says, "I'll follow you wherever you'll go." So he doesn't even have to make that choice between being on the farm and having his life and the girl. The girl's willing to go, but he chooses her life over his life.
Exactly.
It's really interesting.
Yeah, and I think it was more so the community that changed him than she did, if I'm being honest, because, they took him in and fed him, clothed him, basically, and he kind of gave back to the community, whereas she kind of fell for him initially. And as you just said, she basically was head over heels willing to kind of just leave it all behind. So I think it was really, his eyes were open to a community and a belief system that was foreign to him.
And we see that at the end of the film in the last line, where he doesn't say, "I'm her husband, I'm their son, I'm a farmer."
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
This is my life now.
This is my life now. I'm a farmer. Throughout the movie, Court has several run-ins with the local marshal. And we're wondering how our panel feels about how they found the discussion between the two of them very nonchalant, and yet they're talking about his arrest and even hanging him. The discussion of, "I was going to use a new rope with you, but now I'm not. You don't deserve a new rope. I'm going to hang you with an old rope." So what do you think about those nonchalant discussions that they had, and were you surprised that the marshal saved him in the end and didn't just let him go?
I thought it was kind of funny how they spoke to each other, because you can sense that cynicism, you can sense that confidence on both ends. Cord is confident that he won't get hanged, that he won't get caught, and the marshal is confident that he did it. And as he said in the movie, "I have a hunch, and I'm usually right." So there's kind of that back and forth wordplay, and Cord's going to stay away from the trouble, whereas the marshal is basically hell-bent on catching him doing something bad. So when he saved him at the end, I don't know. I was surprised, but then I wasn't whenever the marshal began to speak, because he told him, basically, "I was waiting for you to shoot them so I could kill 3 birds with 1 stone." So it wasn't even that he saved him out of the goodness of his heart. It was more so, "Oh, well, I saved you because it was my duty as the marshal."
What do you think?
I think you kind of see this in Westerns more than other movies, where it's like the law and the outlaw, and they're kind of, at odds with each other. But in this case, it was kind of strange to see, they're just sitting there talking to each other, and he's just like, "I'm going to kill you, right?" And then, he's just like, "Oh, you." But really, at the end, I thought it was good that the marshal showed up when he did, because otherwise Court would be dead, probably. But whenever he saves him, and he's like, yeah, like she said, 3 birds with 1 stone. I think the marshal was just happy to have everything resolved, because ultimately that's what he wanted. And I think that deep down, the marshal really knew that Court was like a bad guy, but he wasn't a bad guy. And so whenever he's like, "I'm a farmer now, I'm getting out of here,"
To quote a recent film.
Yeah, he's like, "I'm not going to ever have to worry about him ever again. So it's all good."
So 100 years from now, we'll be doing the Public Pictures public domain film Wreck-It Ralph, but not for a while.
I never actually saw that movie.
But you just quoted it, so that was fun. What I like about the sheriff is there's 2 things. First of all, he's not a 2-dimensional character. He is not the good guy sheriff who always does what's right. He is cynical. He's patient. He's interested in these characters, and he gets to know them, and he seems to have a relationship with them. The second thing I like about him is he's the only one who's not a Quaker, who's also not afraid of Court Evans. He never shows any fear at all. Here he is, this little old man. He doesn't look particularly fast. He doesn't look particularly strong. He's not a large, robust guy who looks like he could take John Wayne in a fight. And yet, every time he looks at John Wayne, you just get the sense that both he and John Wayne know that he has the upper hand. And I just think it's a very, very interesting character. There's a backstory there that we never hear about how dangerous this marshal must be. And so I'm really fascinated by that character. One of the primary characteristics of this film is the departure from the typical guns blazing Western fare in favor of a softer, slower tone. In other words, more emotions and talking and less action. So did you expect that from this film? And did you end up enjoying it anyway, even though it's kind of an odd Western?
You know, honestly, I like my Westerns to have a lot of shooting and to have a lot of grit. And this was one that didn't have a lot of either.
This had a lot of biscuits, cookies, and affection.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Bibles.
And Bibles.
And it was different. You know, I'm not going to say that I hated the film, because I didn't. I enjoyed it. I liked the way it played out. But ultimately, you know, the slower, steadier pace of a Western without many of the tropes that you see in other movies, like, especially John Wayne movies, you know, because you hear about John Wayne movies, he's always going out guns blazing.
Guns blazing,
you know, and
John Wayne.
And in this one he wasn't. This was my first John Wayne film, and I'm like, is he like this in every single one that he's in? But, you know, I thought it was good. I'm just more of an action junkie, I guess.
Okay, Candace?
I actually really liked it because it wasn't guns blazing. When you say Western film, you expect that, like, the entire movie through, like, 50% of it at the least.
We'll solve all our problems with guns.
Exactly, but this one, it was refreshing in the sense that you kind of know that he's a bad guy. You know that he worked for Wyatt Earp and quit. You know that he's done bad things, typical Western movies that you've seen. But this movie kind of took you, in a sense, after all of that, after the main Western plots that we always see, into him being more human, in a sense. You get to see him as a person rather than just a cowboy.
Yeah. So one of the debates my father, and by the way, Dad, if you're listening, hi, Dad. We both like old movies, and we both watch old movies, talk about them. I'm a John Wayne fan. I like John Wayne. I'm not apologetic. There's some movies that make me wince, but for the most part, I'm a John Wayne fan. My dad's not so much a John Wayne fan. He's more of a Shane guy, Alan Ladd, which is a great film. But my dad always says John Wayne plays the same character in every film, and I just don't see that. I see a completely different character in Rooster Cogburn in True Grit, and I see a completely different character in this movie than I do in She Wore a Yellow Ribbon or in any of his films. I do see some commonalities, but with any actor, some commonalities will go through. I mean, we watch Harrison Ford films, and yeah, Han Solo's not really the same character as Indiana Jones, but there's a lot of overlap. There's some similarities because it's Harrison Ford, and you really have trouble getting away from Harrison Ford. And we don't want to get away from Harrison Ford. We like Harrison Ford. I like John Wayne, and so I enjoyed the film, and I enjoyed the more nuanced approach. I like the solving the problems with Bibles and donuts and not with guns. So I thought that was great. Well, that's all the time we have today at Public Pictures Theater and our presentation of The Angel and the Batman. I mean, the Badman. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel on YouTube to like this film and share it. And we will look forward to seeing you next time at Public Pictures Theater with more public domain films.